Okay, so hi, everybody, and welcome to this program of the College of Law Practice Management. It's a program put on by the Content Committee, and I'm very excited today to be hosting and moderating. I think I know everybody on the call, but just in case, I'm Terri Pepper, and I am a fellow in the college, formerly a trustee. I know a lot of you because I co-chaired the Futures Conference this year. I'm a glutton for punishment, but I had agreed to this before I agreed to that, so there you go. And today we are going to do a little compare and contrast between law firm and law department operations. Before I introduce our speakers, just let me give you a couple of little quick notes. One is, if you are not asking a question or speaking, maybe mute, because I am hearing a little bit of background noise. And I didn't mean you, Toby, but you can mute if you want. I meant the participants, not the speakers. And also, though, if you do have questions or comments, you can pose them in a few different ways. You can pose a question in the chat, and then I'll ask the question when there's a break in what the speakers are discussing. You can raise your virtual hand and I'll call on you, or any other way that you might want to get my attention. I don't know if it's me, but I'm getting a little background. I am coming to you live from London, and so who knows if my internet connection is going to hold true. I'm in a hotel and you just never know. So, but let me introduce our fabulous speakers today. So first we have Laura Jeannet. Laura is the Legal Operations and Administrative Director at Delta Airlines. And in a former life, Laura and I worked together at a large national law firm headquartered in Atlanta, but Laura has worked for many of the large law firms out of New York City in her career. And so she has seen the operations side of things from both the law firm perspective and now the law department perspective. And Laura's also involved in CLOC and has been involved in legal operations. So she'll tell you a little bit more, I'm sure, as she weaves that through her comments. And then also joining us is Toby Brown. Many of you know Toby, he's a fellow, and Toby is today, for about 5 more days, Toby is the Chief Practice Management Officer at Perkins Coie, but he has announced publicly that he is leaving Perkins Coie, and starting next week, he's the CEO of DV8 Legal Strategies, DV8. I just learned about that, and maybe Toby, you can talk a little bit about that when it's your turn to share a little bit. So I've been debating, and the panelists know this. We had a great planning call where they just got into this discussion. I'm not sure that I would ordinarily start a program with this, but it was so juicy and meaty, and I think it'll lead to so many other things as we talk about some of the sort of content things that I'm going to lead off with it. And we're going to talk about trust between law firms and law departments. So the client and their legal service provider, the levels of trust. And Laura, from your perspective, do clients trust their outside law firms or trust law firms in general?
Yes, I think they do. You know, at least like you say, from my perspective, we absolutely do trust our law firms. We trust the relationship partners who we take pride in selecting and changing when we need to. So yeah, we do trust law firms. And when we don't, we let them know that as well. So
what's the other side of the coin? Yeah, right. What's the other side of the coin on that, Toby? If there is one.
Now we get into the part where this is where the discussion became a little more lively. And I'm in a unique sort of situation, kind of in between situations. So I can be, I don't know, more frank or direct or whatever. Although I will be thoughtful. I have this horrible habit where I read outside counsel guidelines like every day. I saw 2 of them today. And I read them for a number of reasons. One, I'm trying to pick out the trends that I see, what they're at, what are clients asking for now versus what they were asking for a year ago and such. And over time, the more I read them, the more what I read was distrust. That the guidelines say you can only have 1 person at a meeting or a deposition, and you can, it's all the things you can't do, and all the things you have to do. I've even seen where they specify the language that needs to go into time entries. Like out on the far end of that, I read an outside counsel guideline where each time entry could only have 1 verb. Literally, it said. And so it occurred to me that it was Well, I'll throw in one more example. I remember this was a client out of Dallas at a prior firm, and they had shared a story with me about something another firm had done that had really upset them. And I said, did you call them? And they, well, we're not sure what we're going to do. Well, 6 months later, they came out with revised outside counsel guidelines. And guess what was in there? Don't do X, Y, and Z that I knew was what that other firm had done. And so so part of our dialogue was, and we can kind of pick it up from here, was I feel like a lot of, and I can say this because I'm about out the door. I feel like a lot of the OCGs that come to Perkins, and literally this is thousands because I've been reading them for 7 or 8 or 9 years now, pretty much laced with, we don't trust you, and so we have to tell you all these things. So Terri, Laura.
Yeah, so I'll chime in there. What I will say is, first of all, Delta's law department, we have about 80 lawyers and staff, including 20 more from our government affairs team. So we consider ourselves a mid-sized law firm and one of the best in the country. And so we know what we want right out the gate. We know what we expect from our outside counsel, and we know what we will not accept from outside counsel. So you're right, Toby, we create these guidelines and we refresh them so far, maybe every 3 years. So twice now since I've been at Delta, going on 7 years in March. What we expect is we assign a relationship attorney at every law firm for every firm that we partner with, our panel firms. It is that relationship partner's responsibility to ensure that any timekeeper working on Delta's matters are privy to our engagement rules, our guidelines. And when we see things like a bill for research, and it's in our guidelines, for example, is in our guidelines, we don't pay for research, then we get a little annoyed, like, are you really reading these guidelines? And so we're not here to babysit you, we're not here to say we don't trust you, but we're giving you our specific guidelines, hoping that you would abide by them, and that we don't have a need for further conversations about violations to the guidelines. So it's not really a trust factor. Is we know what we want, we communicate that in writing, refresh it every 2 or 3 years, and then we go from there. So we do trust our panel firms, but when we see that there's some discrepancies or some violations, we do call you out on it.
So maybe we'll settle on trust with scrutiny.
Yeah, and then training, the relationship partner should be setting these lawyers aside, if they're associates, senior associates, or other partners, letting them know what specific guidelines there are before they even put them on our matters.
So Laura, I'm going to preface this with, this is, look like a devil's advocate sort of thing, because I don't want you to feel like I'm like, coming on you. It's more the industry. So yeah. From a law firm side on this issue, literally, I would say we get at least one of these a day. And we have to run it through a very thick process at Perkins Coie. Every department weighs in on it, because there'll be language about marketing, and there'll be language about ethics, and there'll be language about security, and language about pricing, and language about rates, and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so we actually have a very involved process that it goes through. And then we write up summaries so that the relationship partner that you're talking about, they can get that and see very quickly, here's the stuff I need to pay attention to on this. One of the things that's kept me up at night, and let's just say I'm sleeping better these days, is that in 6 months, client X has given us a new type of work. So there's a new relationship partner, a matter lead, or whatever you want to call them. Do they get the summary? Do they try to find the summary? And then are they teaching their team going through line by line? What I'm getting to here is this is a lot of work and has created a significant, amount of additional overhead for law firms to try to manage this. And there is no technology in the market to do this. None. Yeah. So it is very challenging for a firm to be able to, especially like right now, a hot item for firms is resourcing. Okay, we need to get a new associate in here. I'll be honest, firms don't have an extensive training program to say, new associate, before you bill a minute for Delta, you have to read all of this stuff so you understand and you don't bill for research and stuff like that. It's just, it's a big challenge to do all that stuff.
No, it is, but you either want the business or you don't, right? So you have to put forth that effort, and so here's the other thing we do. We have alerts through our e-billing system, and we happen to use Legal Tracker, and we're happy with that. So we may have new timekeepers, as you mentioned, trying to bill on a matter without first getting approval from the client. That alert will say, hey, stop right there. We have not yet approved this timekeeper. And so they can't go no further. And if they haven't read our billing guidelines, they cannot even submit an invoice for payment. So, it's not all about the relationship partner training, and that's a key part, but you also use technology to help to filter through these other things where there's some violations. There's many ways to skin a cat, so to speak.
All right, well, let's move into some of the more sort of operations kinds of things that we wanted to talk about a little bit, so we can compare and contrast your insights and roles on that. And since you both touched a little bit on training, let's talk about training and what's involved in training a lawyer to work on matters from a law firm perspective, what's involved in training lawyers to work on matters from the law department's perspective. Toby, do you want to start on this one?
Sure. And now I'm going to pick on myself, Laura, if it'll make you feel better. My personal opinion is that law firms' professional development, especially for associates, is inadequate. What we tend to do is say, here's our subscription to whatever PLI, or I even forget what they're called anymore.
Yeah.
Natalie probably knows them better. Is Natalie still on? All of the sort of online CLE things that you can look at. We do have some basic skill sets you need to develop, but I think that's a failing of law firms, and we should do a much better job of that. I think it's a legacy of our industry. In fact, I'll dial it all the way back. I remember years ago when I worked for the Utah State Bar, which is how I know Natalie. I was at a conference, and I called it the Whose Fault Is It conference, because it was, why don't people come out of law school able to practice law? And was it the organized bar? Was it the private firms, or was it the courts, or whose fault was it? And someone gave a presentation and they made this comment. They said, the difference between medical school and law school, once you're accepted to medical school, they do everything they can to help you succeed. Once you're accepted to law school, they do everything they can to try to get you to quit. And though for any of you who are lawyers, you're like, yeah, because I actually worked briefly for the University of Utah Law School. And I helped run the Utah bar exam. It was like, this is a horrible experience for people. And so I've always felt like law firms, it's like, here's the deep end of the pool. We push them off and see who can swim. So we should be doing a much better job. I would say law firms have improved. We have formal training departments and all those sorts of things, but I don't think they're as focused on how to be a good lawyer as they should be.
Yeah.
There are other kinds of training. So.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a partnership. So law firms and clients should work together to train people who are going to be working on those matters. At Delta, we set up secondments. So we'll bring in this young lawyer who is going to be eventually working on Delta's matters, and we teach them a little bit about our business. They meet our business partners, they learn about the work that we do, and we kind of get them acclimated into the fold. In addition, every month we have a Delta Academy, and we have leaders from different practice areas who involve their business partners from different Delta divisions to teach lawyers, what it is Delta do. The other thing we do is we have CLEs. So we will have a law firm, one of our panel firms, come out and conduct a CLE on any topic, you name it. And we specifically say, bring some of your young associates who you anticipate will someday soon work on Delta's matters. So they too can get the experience and learn more about the business. So it really is a partnership. We don't put it all on the law firm, because you know what, we both want to win. And we both want to succeed. So, it's not all on law firms. Know that, at least from Delta's perspective.
But I'll lean in there. I'm a huge fan of secondments for that reason, because it's not just, it's getting to know the business and not just, what business is Delta in, but how you operate and how you prioritize things, what matters, what doesn't matter, organizational ins and outs of the company. So I'm a big fan of this.
Yeah, and to take it a step further, we've done this now since 2018, excluding 2020. Every year, we host an event for our panel firms, and we host it at the Delta Flight Museum. If you haven't been, I encourage you to do that when you're in Atlanta. But we ask our law firms to donate to United Way. So here we are again, partnering. We have this organization, that we want to help in the community with, and we say, hey, partner with us so we can raise money for this cause. So the event is usually held in October. This year it was in November. We have a pre-meeting first about 3 o'clock that goes on for 2.5 hours. We put forth a panel from Delta, which first and foremost included this year our investors relations leader. With COVID and everything that Delta has been through, we thought it was important to communicate our financial side and what the future looks like, because that's important to our law firms who are expecting us to pay those bills, right? We also had our diversity, equity, and inclusion chief officer come and speak about diversity, which is a huge deal for Delta, for Ed Bastian, and for Peter Carter. So she spoke about what we're expecting from our timekeepers and also from other vendors that we may be working with. So they got educated. These law firms, they were each allowed to bring 3 representatives from each of those law firms to sit down for 2.5 hours to learn more about Delta. We even addressed the fact of how best to succeed at Delta. And one of the key things is, you're going to see Delta's name in the news all the time for different things. Hopefully it's more good than bad. But if you see some sort of technology out there that will be good for Delta to leverage, we say to those law firms, pick up the phone, call the lawyer you have that relationship with and say, hey, this is something I see being used at this particular company. Maybe Delta can leverage this. So that gives you that competitive advantage there and make you more valuable, the value add for Delta. And so after that pre-business meeting, we move on to a cocktail reception for about an hour. Everyone's networking, chatting, and getting to know each other. And then we sit down for a nice dinner. We talk a little bit about United Way and how their donations are going to help United Way. And this year we raised over $200,000, and donations are still coming in. And we also do, CLEs we spoke about already. We also do, food banks where we ask a few law firms to come in, and we all go out there and, even build houses for, the Humanities Society. So we do a lot. And we bring those young lawyers along with them so they can, again, experience what Delta is all about.
So it's interesting, Laura, because I just want to pick up on something you said as a good tip for anybody who's in a law firm right now trying to get to know your clients. I've for years advocated that if you're working on a client's matter and they're a company that has investor briefings quarterly, anyone can listen in. You just go to the website and you'll find out the schedule for them. That's a great way to learn about your clients. So I'm glad to hear Delta's kind of formalized that.
Yes.
And by the way, I just want to remind the audience that you can chime in, you can put comments or questions, just raise your hand, unmute, or go in the chat, and we will welcome your comments. I think there's some really good food for thought here. So let's move on a little bit from training, and I'm just going to be all over the board here, but let's talk a little bit about pricing of work and your perspectives and any differences in how you view the pricing of work and either the process that gets you to how you price work or how you actually price it from the law firm department or the law department. Which one of you wants to jump on that one first? Either of you have a burning desire?
Oh, well, I don't want to, but I will. So there's obviously more than one component here, and the base one is rates. And it is that time of year where law firms let their clients know. And there was a lovely article yesterday I saw on the subject. I can tell you generally how Perkins does it. It's very data driven. very focused on what the market is, so that Perkins is setting its rates against the market and not just, licking a finger and going, I think we should raise them this much. In fact, Perkins is quite sophisticated, and it's not just we're raising all rates X%. I'm not saying this is exactly, but just to give an example, like the labor lawyers are probably going to get a lower increase than the privacy lawyers. So those are different markets, different price sensitivities and stuff like that. So when Perkins sets its rates, it's very, very market driven. When it comes to setting a price for a matter, Perkins has a very robust and very experienced pricing team. And what they're trying to do is get to and it's typically, some sort of fixed fee or something around that, or maybe it's volume discounts or whatever. Looking at the type of work, the volume of work, or the specific scope around a matter, and then work with the partner to come up with a number that we think sort of is market for what's being asked for. Another team we have that sometimes leans in there is the legal project management team, and that's with existing more institutional clients where it's, like portfolio deals or something like that. In both circumstances, it's let's get to a market number. That is very challenging. I threw in one word there that's not used a lot by lawyers, and it's scope. Trying to get scope from lawyers is challenging. I still remember this is one of my old stories where I was talking to a client and they said, well, you should be able to give us a fixed fee. And I said, well, can you give me some scope? And they said, well, you've seen the complaint. I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't tell me anything about the scope of the matter. I think, legal departments and law firms are getting better at it, but I'd still say it's a big challenge trying to get to that number. And a lot of times law firms, we have to guess what kind of scope. And sometimes the legal departments are not fully aware because the business unit hasn't really explained to them the importance of a matter. It's because to me, one of the key aspects of scopes is how important is this to the business. If it's way down the scale, that's one thing. If it's way up the scale, that's a very different thing. And so firms have to guess and say, well, we think it's probably this important to the business, and so we're going to price it at that point.
Yeah.
Laura, I'm going to add 2 twists before you jump in for you specifically, based on some things I heard today. One, I heard that clients are putting some significant pressures on rate increases this year. I'd be curious to hear if you can comment on that. And 2, was something I guess I really hadn't heard before, and I don't know if this is more of an outside the US thing than an inside, but we've heard from some firms that are being hit with 20% or more inflation. And in their client agreements, their engagement letters, they have inflationary contingency statements, and they're invoking them now. Have you had any of that from any of your outside law firms? Because I think those are 2 things that are counterbalancing each other.
Yeah, so I won't speak too much about rates and the cadence in which we handle rate increase requests. But I will say that for the longest time, up until January, when we rolled out our new engagement and RFP process, we froze rates for the duration and the lifetime of a matter. So after 2020, we decided, you know what, we need to revisit this. And there were some exceptions, like it is to everything. So this year we said we are going to freeze rates for 2 years. And on the 3rd year, we will consider whether or not we should do an increase. But again, it's on a case-by-case basis. You may have someone who was in that fold where they haven't had an increase for the duration of the matter. And now we're rolling out this new rate design or format. What we would say to that law firm is, what are you going to be doing differently? Are you now adding some sort of technology to the fold, or is it just status quo? And if it's just status quo, then why are we increasing rates? Now, we recognize that associates become partners, and so we have to recognize that and talk about it. But it's not always a given that we're going to give you that increase. And you're right, Terri, there has been some demand on rate increases because, it starts in one particular area. I think it was New York City that started with this huge increase for associates. And so now it trickles down, and then, the law firms call the in-house counsel and say, well, we need to increase this. But we have our standards and we have our formula and we have our approach. And so we don't deviate from that very much. we are Delta after all, so we can kind of, stand firm on what it is we want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I heard today probably sounds like what we're going to hear. There's these really opposing pressures, but I do think the days of warranting a rate increase because you lived one more year, you breathed one more year, probably, I think those are going away. And I like a more thoughtful approach, Toby, like you were describing a little bit. So we'll see. It's interesting to watch if you've been around as long as I have. This pendulum, I remember my very first consulting job way back, talking to a judge who had practiced in the 40s, and he was saying he used to take the file and he'd put it in his hand and he'd say, that feels like a $2,000 fee, and he'd bill his client $2,000. I don't think we'll ever go back there, but we're certainly swinging in a little bit of a pendulum there. It's fascinating.
So this is a topic, again, in my current gray area I can speak a little more directly about. And I'll give counsel to Laura and any other clients here. When you freeze rates, you make it, you create challenges for law firms to make money. And by money, I mean profit. Because you might say, oh, well, they can bill more hours. If I'm losing money per hour, I'm not, it doesn't matter how many hours I bill, I'm not making any profit. And so if you stay hourly and freeze rates, you're putting your firms in tough positions. And I can say I've seen this, I'll say at a prior firm, where with rate freezes year over year, that eventually the lawyers in the firm said, I'm not going to do any work for that client because I've got these other clients that are paying market rates for me. I just throw that out so that you are aware. The other thing, when I've been involved in 2-year rate freezes, is you should expect a 2-year increase. The market goes up. And I know people are saying, oh, what has changed? Why should I pay more? It's how capitalism works. Prices go up every year. I mean, we've had a stretch of modest inflation where the Fed was targeting 2%. We all know it's a lot higher than that right now. But inflation drives pricing at a level, it ends up driving pricing. I can also say this, because at one point at Perkins, I was told not to say this anymore. Clients
What are they going to do? Fire you?
Right.
Clients that have strong pricing pressure, like you say, leverage, that push down really hard on rates, and then they push really hard on diversity, they are not helping the careers of diverse lawyers. Because what happens is the white males can say, like I told you, I'm not going to work on this client anymore because, in fact, I remember one partner said, I like to get paid for working on Fridays, because this client was extracting a 20% discount at that point in time. But when I say it, usually people go, okay, I can kind of see that. What happens is the diverse lawyers are pretty much pushed into working at lower rates than the white male lawyers. And so those numbers catch up to them, especially when they hit the partner level. So I put that on the table. The last thing I'll put on the table, because I've run into it so many times, and I love your comment about, dear law firms, what are you doing differently that adds more value? And this is the changing the service delivery model. It's really, how do you do things with cheaper hours or fewer hours? But I can tell you, because this has happened to me time and time again, and the story I'll tell here, this is when I was at Aiken Gump. It was a power company that came to me and they said, we have to reduce, it was M&A work, this work by 10%. It's a command from on high. And I said, let me try something and come back to you. And so I came back to the general counsel and I said, if we can rotate in non-partner track lawyers into these 3 roles, and I used one of his deals, and I said, they are less expensive. And I said, just by doing that, I clearly demonstrated a 10% reduction. He said, absolutely not. And I said, why not? He goes, well, I'm hiring your firm to get those top of market lawyers, and I don't want these other lawyers. And I said, okay. So the lesson there was, law firms could do some things, but you might not agree with what they're doing. In fact, if I really push this to the extreme, I could lower legal bills dramatically and say there's going to be one partner and the rest of the work is going to be done by lawyers in India.
Yeah.
You would not like that. You would not like that. So I think it's a collaboration and a partnership to say, how do we lower not, I would even set rates out of the picture and just say, okay, if we're paying X dollars per matter, how do we make that X minus?
Yeah, no, points well taken, but what I will tell you is Delta's lawyers, and I don't know about other companies, but we are very much involved in every single matter that law firms are working on. We're not just saying, here, law firm, take this matter, find a resolution for it, and then tell us what the outcome is. We are strategizing and working with you from point A to point B. And in some respects, teaching you as well. So it is a collaboration. I will also say that, as far as diverse lawyers and them being discouraged or disenfranchised, we are real keen on making sure that we're working with law firms to make sure that those minority lawyers are not disenfranchised. You can't hire a minority lawyer and sort of set it and forget it. You have to engage them.
Oh yeah,
And,
oh yeah.
You have to engage them. Maybe put them on a board of some committee, or have them working on Delta's matters and teaching them, as they go along, so that they're learning. But we're not trying to minimize their rates. In fact, the contrary is true, because we're real keen on making sure we have diverse lawyers working on Delta's matters. And it doesn't mean a cheaper rate, because that defeats the whole purpose. And we welcome ideas from law firms. Multiple law firms working on the same panel have spoken for Delta events, like at the summit with this United Way event. So there is a partnership. And I think law firms should not look at each other as competition. See how you can collaborate so that you can both satisfy the client's needs. It's not a competition. Remove that from the scope, so that it's a win-win for everybody.
This is public. Perkins has actually done that with another client, and we partnered with two other firms because we knew not one of us could, provide all the service. Yes. And so we came up with a formula for how we would do that. So we have done those sorts of innovations.
Yes.
But let me ask a baseline question. How, especially right now with inflation so high, how can clients not expect the price of legal services to go up right now? The price of everything is going up right now. So when I hear it was, oh, we've got a recession or whatever, this kind of stuff, I'm like, yeah, I know, but and in certain industries are obviously doing better than others. The airline industry is doing pretty well right now compared to, I'll say
they're catching up, right? They're catching up.
Yeah.
The worst time in history.
Doesn't feel like it with the price of tickets, but yeah.
Well, you get what you pay for, Terry. What can I tell you?
I'm a Delta loyalist.
That's my point. So I'm an economist by training and avocation. I'm always following trend reports. And I happened to see one this week, and this is probably not fair, Laura, for me to say this. You're not prepared for it. Airline prices went up 42% year over year between September 21 and September 22. So the price of everything's going up. And I know why the price is going up. The price of fuel is a big driver. There's a whole bunch of drivers to those prices going up. And I want the planes to actually have fuel in them when I get on.
Good idea.
So the same pressures are hitting law firms. So I'm kind of, if I were a client, I'd be going, okay, I know their rates are going to go up this year because there's heavy inflation pressures.
Yeah. Well, we have conversations with our law firms about these issues with rates. We agree on what the path will be. And like I said, there are exceptions to everything. And so if there is a conversation to be had, the law firms will initiate it and we will review it and get back to them. And if it makes sense to increase it, we would. But it's not just a given that we would do that.
Oh yeah.
Because we have to make money too, so we have to make sure we're strategizing and managing the dollars that go out the door.
If what's going through my head is any indication, I'm going to pause for a second because I have a feeling the audience is also having lots of thoughts on this subject. And if anyone wants to weigh in with your own observation or suggestion or comment, now's your time. Unmute and we'll call on you.
Terry, I think they're getting uncomfortable because they all turned their cameras off. So.
I'm telling you, they're all sitting in the background. Wow. All right, well, you're missing your opportunity, but okay, we'll move on. So let's talk about technology and rolling things out and how sometimes law firms and law departments can partner on these things. Laura, do you want to start with that? Because I know you have a recent story to tell.
Yeah. So with respect to our document management system, we rolled out Net Documents, I guess about 6 years ago. And we hired a third party to help us with the implementation. So, when you hire someone, you expect them to have the expertise that you need, which is why you're hiring them and not doing it yourself. So we hired this person and they insisted on doing things their own way, despite our efforts to show them how things were being done as far as saving documents. We were using a file share system. There was no document management system when I started at Delta.
Wow.
So they came in, they did their evaluation, and they set out on how they were going to roll this all out. It was a disaster, it failed, and as a result, we lacked the engagement that we needed. So we still have people using a share folder. Some people are using SharePoint, and very few people are using our Net Documents tool. But recently, we did an RFP and engaged a number of different consultants, and we just recently selected one, and I'm happy to say we selected HBR, who I love dearly. We work with them on the annual surveys every year. So Kevin Clem and his team will be helping us to really either rebrand Net Documents or look at other options like iManage for a document management tool. In addition to that, we have created an operations and technology committee within the law department consisting of someone from every practice area. So we have buy-in from everywhere, and it has lawyers, paralegals, and admins involved, as well as myself. So we're looking to do some great things with the committee and with HBR. But really, when you're rolling out something, make sure you have the right vendor to help you do that.
I'm thinking HBR is having a good year because this is the second webinar I've been on today where someone publicly said they just hired them.
Yeah, sure did.
It's good time to be Nick and Chris. Yes, Patrick.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks for that anecdote. It's very good to see you again, by the way. From
Yes,
over
yes,
3 days.
absolutely.
I'm curious, what do you think was the, because I'm very into adoption and change management. What do you think were the 2 or 3 key reasons why that initial DMS project failed? Was it lack of real change management? Was it, as you suggested, that they just wanted to do it their way, they weren't listening to us? What are the reasons that you think it failed?
Yeah, no, good question, Patrick. And what I would say primarily is, instead of me, and I take some responsibility in this because I was leading the project and we'll be doing the same this time. Instead of me saying to that vendor, show me how this should be, what I should have done was outlined how we're setting up our different folders, our structure of documents, so that they can then try to compare and make it similar to what we're already doing so that the change management aspect wouldn't be so severe. I mean, these are folks, like I said, who did not have a document management system, had their own certain way of saving on that file, the share folder. And so they wanted no parts of this. But once you had one practice area say, no, I'm not using this, I'm going back, the word gets out. And so it was almost a complete failure. And then on top of that, later on, Delta as a company, as an enterprise, rolled out SharePoint. And I'll be the first to say, when SharePoint rolled out, I stopped using Net Documents because SharePoint was so easy and it accomplished what I needed. So like I said, we're going to have HBR come in, partner with us, rebrand this whole thing, or find a new solution and work on change management. HBR has experience in doing that because that's important. And they will have not workshops, but they'll meet with different people within the department to see what's important to them, what they want to see out of this tool. And then we'll go from there to make it a success. And so I remain hopeful.
So Patrick, you already know the answer to this because you've done this many times for many years, which is—
You mean failed, Toby? I certainly have experienced failures. So
exactly. But point being, this is, Terry, I'm using this to talk about the client advantage thing.
Yeah, that's fine. That's great.
Something that I helped develop at Perkins Coie, which we branded as Client Advantage. And it was document management with one of Perkins' clients. I'd gone to talk to them about pricing. And what I've been doing for years is telling clients, if you want to learn more about pricing and sort of mechanics and what law firms do and how you can be more effective with them. So I was on site with this client doing that, and they said, well, we have another question. I said, what's that? And they said, document management. And Patrick, because we met back when I was doing knowledge management at Fulbright years ago. I said, well, my experience is dated, but what's your situation? And they outlined it, and it was a little comical because they had iManage, but they were using it as a records management system, not a document management system.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I got people with decades of document management experience. Would you like to talk to them? And so from that was born the Client Advantage program. And what it is that, and it's not for every client, but for, typically larger revenue clients, but sometimes, growth clients, where we say, if you have any operational projects or challenges, raise your hand, give me a call. And, some of our clients call me all the time, and I've had to repoint them in the past few weeks, but it can be like we've done e-billing. One called and said, hey, we're going to implement e-billing. And I said, I got a team that's certified on 28 e-billing systems. Here you go. So, I say this, so if there's any clients on the call, reach out to your key law firms. And if you're going to do this, and that's in our prep call with Laura, I was like, hey, and I would say you made a good choice with Kevin and HBR.
Thank you.
But if you wanted someone to come in and just spend an hour with you and chat about document management best practices and how you get lawyers to actually use it, see, Patrick, you would be the perfect person to come and spend that hour with them, so that when they do engage with HBR, they're coming from a much better position of knowledge and, best practices and all that kind of stuff. So that was a roundabout
Toby,
way.
quick question on the Client Advantage. You might have said this and I missed it, but I'm looking down at my notes and I don't see it there. Do you charge for that service, or it's just offered as an adjunct to what you do for a client?
It's a value add. It's a value
Great.
add. And I used to say it was every operational function but marketing, because I'm like, why are they going to need marketing? But then one client called and said, hey, I'm doing a presentation to the CEO on our 5-year patent strategy. Do you have anyone who knows how to prepare PowerPoints and presentations? And I said, yeah, actually we do.
We didn't call it any formal name, but when I was in marketing about 1 million years ago, when I used to ride on my dinosaur to the office, we often consulted with clients. We'd be called in back then to do consulting for clients on marketing things.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think that's great.
it is great. And I would say too, when you have your clients who are hosting these summits like Delta did, you should bring your marketing people to that, to those meetings. Not just lawyers, bring those business development leaders and the marketing folks as well, because they and I work closely together and we can make good things happen.
And I'll take one step back, and then Dennis, I do see your hand up. Laura, I have to commend you on how you do your panel, because too often the clients think getting the panel is success. No, engaging with the panel is where you get your value. It's not saying we've got a list of 20 law firms or how many it is. It's getting the 20 law firms together and understanding your business. So yeah. I want to make sure I mentioned that, but Dennis has had his hand up.
Yeah, Dennis, go
Thank
ahead.
you, Toby.
Yeah, I wasn't actually planning to plug this new column I have out on the legal technology hub for Nikki Shaver, but which is about the greatest disconnect in law. All right, and in this article, I talk about the greatest disconnect in law department innovation, but I can't even count the number of general counsel, in-house counsel who say, I wish my law firms who have experience in all these tech tools would just offer to help me out, and say, like, I'm trying to decide what this is. They've already been through it. They've seen what happens. They've evaluated things. It'd be so awesome if they would just share that. And I say, do you ask them to do that? And they're like, no, we really don't. But we're kind of waiting on them to offer that. And then I talk to law firms. I say, man, these general counsels would really love you to do this. And except Toby, you're the first person I've heard who actually does this, which doesn't surprise me, but they're like, no, we don't want to like potentially insult our clients, to imply that they don't know what they're doing. And I'm like, maybe you should just like get in the same room and like talk for a little bit. It might really help.
Yeah.
Well, this is a very good point, Dennis, and it's good to see you, by the way. Is that, you know why law firms don't, and you just nailed it, because people like me aren't in the meeting. I'm in a very privileged position where I have a lot of direct client interaction, and that lets me get a big sense of what clients care about and what their pains are and all that kind of stuff. But partners will never ask that question. I mean, I get, when I talk to ops people and they've got this frustration with other firms, I'm like, require they bring their pricing person to the conversation. Require it. Because there's no way the partner's going to bring it, or have them bring their CIO or their CKO or whomever it is. Unless you demand it and require it, the partners, it's just so far outside their wheelhouse, they're not going to offer it. They don't know how to talk about it. So
Yeah,
Amazing.
it is. I will say that CLOC, the Corporate Legal Operations Consortium, if you don't know about CLOC, you should learn about CLOC. I've been a member of CLOC probably now for 6 years. 2 years ago, they decided that, you know, it's not just about in-house counsel. We need to have law firms involved. We need to have law schools involved, vendors, ALPS, everybody, because it's the ecosystem and we all have something to share and benefit from. So to your point, Dennis, I think it's important to have law firms speak up and offer these different value adds to their clients, because it matters. And Toby, to your point as well. And I congratulate you on doing that. So good for you.
Yeah, just one follow-up on that is that what I would say is watch what we're going to be doing at Michigan State Law School in the legal ops area. We're talking about some collaborations already. We have alumni who've been pioneers in a lot of these fields, and at the Center for Law, Innovation, and Technology, which I am now the full-time director of. Watch some of the things we have planned, and I want to try to fit. This is one of the niches I want to try to fit into in legal ed, leading to legal ops.
Very good.
We'll
Excellent.
have to let the conference committee for next year know about that. See if there's if it fits into some of the programming, because that'd be interesting, I think, for the college and the college's agenda as well. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I had asked Laura and Toby to each share with each of us their top challenges the top things they're dealing with on their agenda. Now, Toby, yours is probably building your business, but your new business. But what are the kind of top issues that you're taking a look at now that are you're working through, that are challenging you, that are providing opportunities? Doesn't have to necessarily be a challenge.
well, and I'll couch this from the law firm side. And this is also a moderate sales pitch. Not for my company. I think a big challenge right now is law firms sit on piles and piles and piles of data. It's siloed off. I see Daryl nodding. It's siloed off in 50 systems and all kinds of stuff like that. There has emerged an approach and tool to help alleviate that and help law firms get better at organizing their data, at being able to move their data between their own systems, and also to exchange data with clients. And it's the SALI standard that is now in version 2.0. And I know most of you are probably tired of hearing me talk about SALI, but it's SALI.org. In fact, I have a call after this with the data strategist for Perkins to talk about our data strategy, because I've been trying to inject some of the business strategy into the data strategy. But I think that is going to be just a bigger and bigger and bigger challenge. We don't have, in fact, Laura, I think we talked about this a little bit in the call. We don't, as an industry, we're not sharing actionable data back and forth. We send emails back and forth.
Right.
And so we don't, that makes it almost impossible for us to capture information. But that part of that is we speak different languages. Your taxonomy is different than Perkins or any other firms you use. So SALI has created a common language so that it will reduce that pain and make it easier to understand our data. So that's the topic I would throw out.
Yeah.
Interesting. Laura, what about you? What are some of the top
Yeah.
issues or challenges you're facing?
So I have a few, but I'll just focus just to piggyback off of what Toby is saying. This year, I've been driving knowledge management. trying to put together the collective wisdom of our lawyers, our paralegals into this one system that happens to be SharePoint, where we don't have to recreate the wheel. You know, if we worked on an ERISA litigation matter, we can go in there and find out all the details about that, how many hours we spent, who worked on it, what were the, the lessons learned, and those sorts of things. We can also find out who speaks a certain language, or who's able to travel, whatever it is. Everything is located in this one place. Who is the expert in a particular area? All of that too would be in this one SharePoint database. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is DE&I, trying to get timekeepers to provide, their race and ethnicity. That's important to Delta. And, I get it. If you have a question about why you need to have it, why we need to have it, ask the question, but don't just decline to answer the question. We want to get there. We have our goals in mind, and we want to make sure that we do have diverse timekeepers on every single matter. And, we're using the carrot, not the stick, but, it's a firm carrot though. So we want to make sure that we are really increasing our diversity with our timekeepers across all law firms that we partner with.
Interesting.
And one other note, I know that the billing people who's managing all of the e-billing may not know what the clients is asking for. So it may be them that's declining all of this diversity information. So the relationship partner should be communicating that down so that we get the information that we need.
That, I'm going to riff on that just for a moment. I see that as a challenge, and I see that as a new or an altered role at law firms, because we run into it regularly because we come up with creative pricing, or we're trying to comply with the EI requirements of various clients, and the frontline people are so far away from the information, and I don't want this to sound derogatory, they're more administrative than they are analysts. And I think law firms would be wise to start putting analyst type people, because we need people in those roles who can make a judgment call and go, this does not look right. I don't think I know Delta's going to reject this bill. Let's not send it until we fix it. But that's not the kind of people in those roles. And if there's some complicated fixed fee, it's challenging to get bills out. I'll just say that.
Yeah, good point.
So, it's funny, what I'm hearing is the differences aren't as big as you might think between an in-house law department and a law firm. They're really not. The challenges are similar. The issues are similar. The tactics are similar. It's just the power position in a way that's a little bit different. So it's very interesting. But before we completely adjourn, I have to say that you may have recalled when we first started promoting this, that Kathleen Pearson was supposed to be the other panelist, and she had a conflict come up, and Toby filled in at the last minute. And in fairness to Toby, and I know we normally don't like sales pitches, I just want to give you a minute to tell everyone what you're going to be doing next and what DV8 legal strategies does, because I know everybody a lot of people on this call know you and will want to hear what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Terry, and I'll keep it very brief. So over the years, I've watched, and as I've told you, I watch economic trends and such, is that every law firm touts the same strategy. In fact, I still remember the watershed moment. It was when Baker Botts got a new managing partner in their Palo Alto office, and the article said, "Here's our strategy." And I'm like, wait a tick, that's our strategy. And then I realized it was everyone's strategy. And what I also realized, and everyone on this call probably knows this, law firms really don't have strategies. We're not one business, we're 300 businesses. And law firms have been afraid to say, here's the direction we need to go, because as soon as they say that, 20 partners are going to call the managing partner and go, are you trying to tell me I don't belong at this firm because I don't see my name on that strategy?
Mark easy like that.
So I think I can help firms realize where they are in the market and come up with an actual strategy, and then strategies below that. Like, I actually told you, and I told you but didn't tell you, Perkins rate setting strategy. That is a pricing strategy. It's pricing to brand, pricing to market. I would argue a lot of things law firms do are done in a decision vacuum. It's why I'm talking to the data strategist for Perkins after this, is he asked me, he goes, well, what data is important to the firm? And I'm like, that's a really good question. And if you don't know what the strategy of the firm is, how are you going to come up with a data strategy that makes any sense?
Right.
You know, I've written an article, which I'll probably post at some point, where it occurred to me most pricing teams help the wrong partners, because we help the partners who are trying to give stuff away, sorry.
Okay.
And we should be more focused on pricing with key clients and real originators and stuff like that. So I think there's a space to come and help clients, actually legal departments, because I know a lot about how law firms operate, to help law firms. And actually something that started popping up since this has gone public is legal tech vendors. I have a singular focus on how law firms can be more profitable, and not by overpricing, Laura, I'll just say that.
That's
by,
good.
by changing the delivery model and how stuff gets managed and all kinds of stuff like that. So the legal tech vendors are like, wait a minute, you know, how does my tech play into that more profitable firm? So I've been surprised. I've been very, I realized how fortunate I am to have friends like a lot of you people here that are reaching out and supporting me and stuff like that. So that's the direction I'm looking to go with it. And that's when people look, in fact, I'll pick on poor Matt Sunderman at HBR. He goes, Toby, what does DV8 stand for?
Well, I
And
just asked you that at the beginning of the call.
I replied with the word deviate. And he goes, oh, because that's the
Once you
premise.
hear it, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Premise is if law firms don't deviate, they're, as I say, I said in my LinkedIn thing, if we all have the same strategies, we already know who won.
Yeah.
So if you want to figure out how to win, then you probably have to deviate from what you're doing.
So our chat group here has been creating the definition of a typical law firm strategy. Strategy usually seems to be, we are a full service firm doing everything for everyone and better than other firms do it. So thank you to Dennis and Geneva for that. Excellent. So we have about 2 minutes left. I'm going to let the audience have one more chance to have any comments, questions, any feedback you want to give to our speakers. But while you're deciding if you want to unmute and chip in, I just want to say thank you so much to Toby and Laura. It was really interesting, and I really enjoyed working with the two of you. Debbie has asked me to tell everyone that this recording will be available probably late tomorrow or first thing Friday. It'll be on the college's website if you want to share it. Dennis wants to know if you have a DV8 license plate yet, Toby.
I do have a car problem, so.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And stay tuned for a good schedule of programs on the content committee of the college in 2023. I've seen a little preview of it, and there's some great programming coming up. I think you'll enjoy it. We'll see you soon. Thank you.